Good morning, my wonderful team of economics teachers, subject advisors, and you, my learners, who are the most important people who are about to sit for the examinations. Right, as you prepare for your final exam, I would like to look at the following with you to ensure that you have attended to whatever you need to attend without leaving anything important. Right, the most important thing that you need to do, you must use your examination guideline. Your examination guideline is actually based on your CAPS document, so you will not go wrong, and it will also give you how much you must do and how far, that is the depth and the breadth of the content. And very important, guys, you need to know your content. And you need to know the structure of the paper and your strength in relation to the structure of the paper. I'll talk about that in a short while. And then the responding to questions is very, very important in economics for you to do well. And then you must practice using your previous question papers. But as you use your previous question papers, you need to have known about the changes that are present so that when you use your old papers, you know exactly how they affect your performance. In terms of, say, for an example, when I talk about performance, say the marks, old papers that were, say, 8 marks as higher order questions, now they are no longer higher order questions, they are regarded as middle order questions. So if that question was to appear again in these papers, that is, if it was there, say, 3 years back, 4 years back or so, then you may find that question in your middle order questions. That is what I mean by being careful how you use your previous question papers. Right, before we come to using your strength, I want us to start with your examination guideline. As you look at your examination guideline, you need to not mix your sections. Remember, when you do paper 1, you must do paper 1, and you must do these topics: the secular flow, business cycle, public sector, foreign exchange market, protectionism, and free trade. And then you must also do the growth and development, industrial development policies, and then the economic and social performance indicators. Some of the learners confuse this because of the fact that they do the microeconomics before they do the pursuits. Please do not do that. And then the structure of the paper, we'll talk about that as we go on with knowing your strength. But what I want to do with you right now is for you to look at these. This is where I want to go. This is where I want to go. This is very important for you guys. As you study, look at your examination guideline. Look at these right now of the macroeconomics, the secular flow. In the secular flow, do I know my open economic secular flow? Can I do the concepts? Can I draw, interpret the 4-sector model, and so on and so on? So in other words, this would be your checklist as you go on with your work. For example, discuss in detail the markets within the 4-sector model. And when you do that, do I know the markets? What affect a market? What is there? What must I discuss? Those are the things that you need to attend to as you do your preparation. Right, now let's go back to, we said you use your examination guideline. Now you must know your content. As you know your content, this will help you then to decide which content are you strong in. Let me make an example by using the structure of the paper. Remember, in our structure of the paper, there's 30 marks of a compulsory section A. And in that section A, there's multiple choice, there's match, and there's concepts. As the paper is being set, the examiners would take 15 marks of they will take 15 marks. Let's go back to that. I don't know what I did. I don't know what I did. Let me just go back. Let me go back to... Right. The examiners will take 15 marks from the macro, 15 marks from the pursuits. Now, here you are faced with your strengths now. If you are, say, good with macroeconomics, you are writing, let's just check the macroeconomics alone before we add the pursuits. You have your 15 marks of the 30 marks from macroeconomics, and then question 2 will definitely be from macroeconomics. It will not be from pursuits. And then question 4 will be 20 marks or more. Remember, because now in paper 1, the macroeconomics has 5 topics, and then there's 3 topics in pursuits. So sometimes in question 4, we not necessarily have 20-20. Sometimes it can be 30-20, or depending on the examiners. And then question 5 would be then the macroeconomics. Now, if you were to add only the macroeconomics, you will have 115 marks. Remember, you are writing out of 150. You have 115 marks based on the macroeconomics, which gives you 76% of the paper. But because you still must now add the content from the pursuits to this to make it 30 marks. You must still add the 20 marks from the pursuits on your question 4 to add this to get to your 115. And therefore, if you say you have realized as you analyzed your performance in March, your performance in your daily activities, your performance in any of the assessment that took place, but I think I am enjoying and I'm doing better in macroeconomics, then as you study, do all the questions on section A. Practice a lot of questions that in section B, question 2, and then do a lot of questions in question 4 as well as in question 5. Normally, a learner who is focused, when I look at the script, I can tell that this learner does know where her strengths lies, because when you choose question 2 and question 4, you are likely to choose question 5. The same when you choose question 3 and question 4, you are likely to choose question 6. So whilst you are studying and doing everything else, but make sure that you prepare yourself well with the content that you are good at. That is what we mean when we say, look at the structure of the paper, take advantage of the sections you are good in, and excel. And if you can do very well in macroeconomics, then when you go to paper 2, it is the same understanding. If you are good with microeconomics, then you can do microeconomics. But if you are good with contemporary, then you can do contemporary. So you are actually increasing your chances of passing a lot. Right, let us look at what else do we need to talk to. Now we need to talk to the responding to questions. Right, when you respond to questions, my candidates, remember what must happen. You must do the multiple choice. When you do your multiple choice, you need to remember that your question has 3 options to choose from. And these options you choose, the others are just distractors. And there's only one correct answer to the multiple choice. So either you know your content, and if you don't know your content, then you must use the elimination process. When you do the elimination process, let's go to the question paper so that maybe we can use something that we see. Let me see if I can open this question paper. Okay, the question paper won't open now. But what must happen then? You do the elimination process. In the elimination process, then you say, let's say for an example, you were supposed to choose the most correct answer where they say gross domestic product is, and then they give the different alternatives. Where they give the alternatives, say for an example, the other one says by the final goods and services, by the citizens of the country. Then you know, no, but it can't be this because I don't think it is this one. Then you go to the next one. Then you eliminate it. Then you say possibly it is this one, but don't leave the spaces blank. Right, I'm trying to see if I can get a question paper at least, even if it's just from... Let me see if I can get a question paper that we can use, because that one won't open now. Right, let's just use this one. It's fine. What I wanted to talk about, right, we talked about the elimination process. And then after the elimination process that we have discussed now, maybe let's leave that one. I want to go to the next thing that I want to talk about as you approach or as you answer your objective questions. Remember, the next thing that you have to do after you have answered your multiple choice would be to do your match. And as you do your match, I would advise you, because if, say, you want to read from column A to column B, it takes longer. Then you have leakages. After having leakages, you must go read all these long sentences until you find the one that matches with the leakages. But it is easier if, for an example, if you read from this side, you go to that side. For an example, let's take any of these. Okay, there's the answer to leakages. Let's take another one. Let's say you are now reading this one. The total value of final goods and services produced within the boundaries of a country for a specific period. Then when you come this side, you will just read very short phrases or words. Then you can say, okay, it must be gross domestic product after quickly reading through. So I would advise you, as you respond to your match questions, start reading the sentence, the phrase this side, and then come and check the concept that is being explained by the different explanations or the phrases. It's quicker that way, and it also saves you time. Right. Another thing that you need to do, it is very important that you know your concepts. Your concepts are impacting on your performance because you have the 6 marks of which you must know concepts, 3 of those from your macro, and then 3 from your pursuits. And these concepts, sometimes when you go to, in fact, not sometimes, when you go to your data response questions, your third question is likely to also ask you for a concept. And therefore, it is important for you to understand your concepts very well. And another way, perhaps, that I can give to you as a tip so that you learn the concepts. I want to go to I want to come here and look at, okay, it's fine. I didn't put the mind the gap on this one, but what I wanted to advise you is look at your mind the gap. And when you look at your mind the gap, you will realize that before you start with any content, there are concepts that are explained there. What they have done is almost like your match. It's almost like what you have just done with the match. In your concepts, the mind the gap will have the concepts here, but they say it has leakages and then it has the outflow of money in the economy. It will be right next to it this way. And then when you study, before you start with the work, just try and conceal or close this section. And then you read the explanation, write the concept it is explaining. Read the explanation, write the concept that it is explaining. When you have finished, check what you have written against what Mind the Gap said that a phrase or explanation is explaining. That way, you'll be able to know more or less how many of your concepts pertaining to the particular topic that you are about to discuss that you really understand. So the Mind the Gap is actually a very nice tool to use for a number of things. Right, let us now go to section B. When you answer your section B questions, make sure, my learners or my candidates to be very soon, that you respond as per requirements of the question. For an example, in question 2, your 2.1.1, you will have just the naming kind of question where you need to give a one-word kind of response. The same will happen when you answer question 3 and when you answer question 4 on the following indicated questions. So, but when you come to question 2, for an example, 2.1.2 or 3.1.2 or 4.1.2, then you can't give one word. That is the problem we encounter at the center when we try to mark your responses, because what is happening then is that we cannot give you full marks. Let me go back to our question paper and see if what I'm saying will make better sense to you guys. Right. For an example, here it says, name 2 types of business cycles that can occur in the market economy. Then all we have to do is just give the name of the business cycle and give another name of the business cycle. So those are just one-word kind of response. But if we say to you, why would an increase in import tariffs benefit the South African economy? If you give one word, like positive, like just one word, although that word can be encompassed in the answering of the question, we cannot give you full marks, because here we expect you to give a brief explanation of the response. That is what I meant by your response must be in line with the marks that are going to be allocated to you. And therefore, make sure that you respond accordingly. Another very important thing, you have your data response questions. When you have your data response questions, the same understanding that I have just given here is applicable here. Say, for an example, if you have your data response question here, there is the data, then you have the questions. Now, when you look at these, more or less, they need the one-word kind of answer. But when you come to the third question, like we said, if you know your concepts, you'll also do well in the third questions of your data response question. Briefly describe the term medium-term budget policy statement, which now we are talking a lot about, or we are hearing a lot about over the news these days. Right. And then the fourth question, explain the relationship between the main budget and the medium-term budget, the MTEF. Let me just call it the way it is written here. Now, you have to give also a brief explanation. When we give this brief explanation, there must be an explanation that is not a one-word sentence. And when you respond to this question, you can't just tell me what is the main budget, what is the medium-term budget. You have to tell me what happens in the medium-term budget that is related to the main budget. So don't separate them and answer them individually. And then question 5 will always be your much more difficult question. And therefore, it is important that when you answer that also, you apply your mind, right? Maybe I must not come back here. I must stay here a little to illustrate what we say you must do in the data response questions. When you answer your data response questions, for an example, we have this one. Although it's a middle order, it's a bit difficult. It says, what can the government do to solve the current financial challenges of state-owned enterprises? Now, one, you need to know what is a state-owned enterprise. Right, you need to know the role of the government and the challenges that the government is faced with regarding the state-owned enterprises. If I may say so, say for an example, if we talk about SAA, if we talk about Telkom, all the state-owned enterprises, you have heard these over the news. Sometimes you don't have to necessarily have read it only from the textbook. You have heard the arguments around them. Those are the things that you can write about on these, because these are more of application questions. Do you think it is necessary to sell these enterprises? Do you think they must be part-owned? Or what must exactly happen? Those are the arguments that we have heard that were brought forward by the different stakeholders like the unions and the political parties and so on and so on. Apply your mind and respond accordingly. Right, this was just an example that I was using to talk about the data response questions. Now, on your data response questions, something that I need to warn you about when you look at your data response questions is that the 1 mark and the 2 marks, the 1 mark of the first question and the 1 mark of the second question are no longer as easy as it was. That is what I said. Be careful when you use your previous question papers, because in the old question papers, you would find the information regarding the response in the data response question. That is no longer the case. We'll talk about this when we do our national aggregates again, so that you can see that it is no longer as it was, where the answers were in your data response question. Right. Now, this is just saying how you should respond to questions. And now, after we have talked about the data response question, we can look at how must you respond to the 8 marks questions. The 8 marks questions are also, the first one would be your middle order question and your higher order question. How you respond to the questions is also dictated to you by how the question was asked. For an example, I'm just using one of the common do words that will be used, like the verb that will be used. Here they will say, briefly discuss this, then it means you must recall the information that you have about the content. Let me make an example. Briefly discuss the household as a participant in the circular flow. Then you can talk about the household as a participant in the circular flow. But if they say, for an example, the same household, how does the household contribute in the economic growth of the country? Now, you can't use all the information that you used there when you were answering the question under the middle order. And you must also apply your mind in terms of what the household does, what is the economic growth, and therefore how is what the household does make a change, a positive change for that matter, because we said the contribution to the economic growth. What is it that the household is doing that can make our GDP or our growth be better? Then you remember, okay, normally when the household, for an example, buys goods and services, then this leads to the businesses producing more goods and services. You see, if the household gives the factors of production, remember we need the labor, we need the capital, we need all the factors of production so that production can take place. So you must now remember in that line that, okay, the household offers the factors of production to the business sector so that goods and services as well as other things can be done to increase the GDP. Can you see the thinking? The thinking is different, but the information that you have is still relevant. It is how you respond to the question that matters, because how you responded here, if you respond the same way as that when we have asked you the question in a higher order form, then you are likely to lose a lot of marks, if not all the marks. So it is important that let us just look if maybe this question paper that we have here can actually bring home what we are saying. Okay, this one is with the usage of graphs mainly. Let's go maybe to the one that does not necessarily, right, like this one. Explain the role of international institutions in standardization of a country's indicator. Can you see? Here you need to recall what, explain the role of international institutions. Then you need to remember what are those institutions, and then how do they assist in the standardization of the country's indicators. And remember, you also need to know what indicators are. What are your economic indicators? What are your social indicators? Then you respond to the question. It is not a very difficult question. But now when you come here and say, how can an equal standard of living related to North-South divide be addressed? Then the way you respond, although the same information could have been used when we say explain the unequal standard of living, here you need to first start and say the unequal standard of living can be addressed by, then you start with your points. You see, that is the difference between your higher order and your middle order questions. Don't get confused. Don't think the higher order is something that is out of reach. It is actually within reach. You just have to apply your mind and how you put your information. That is very important. Right, and then we go to what you must do when you do your section C. Your section C is your essays. I hope this will open now. Right, your section C is your essays. And these essays are contained in your examination guideline. And before in the paper, let me go here first again. Before you even attempt your essay, you have this on your question paper, guys. And this says, your essay, after you have written your essay, these are the things that we will look at when we mark your essay. For an example, we need to see the introduction. And your introduction is not a difficult thing to do. You include it, you just say, give the definition of the content contained in your question. That is a good starting point, would be to define the main concept related to the question topic, right? And then do not include any part of the question in your introduction. What do you mean by not including any part of the question in your introduction? If you are supposed to discuss the features of business cycle, for an example, then there's information that is there in the question itself. We don't need you to repeat that and make it your introduction. But if you explain to us or what a business cycle is, then it means what are you doing? You are defining or you are explaining the concept related to the topic. That is what is meant. So you need to, every time when you do your essay, just read these, because they give you guidance in terms of what is it that you must do as you write your essay. And then the main part you'll have there in the main, discuss in detail, examine, compare, evaluate, differentiate, explain. And when you look at your main part, most of the time it's just the middle order. They will ask you to differentiate, to explain, to compare, and so on. But usually when you come to your additional part, that is where now you will need to, it's a higher order, you need to say, for an example, give your opinion, evaluate, say this is good for 1, 2, 3, this is bad for 1, 2, 3, therefore this is what must happen, and so on. Or that is what must happen in the additional part, which is why we say it is higher order, it is much more difficult. And then the conclusion, then you make a conclusion. As you make your conclusion, don't repeat what you have already said. So this is there in every question paper that we give you. So if you have not read it before, just go through it for about a minute or so to understand, so that you don't make the same mistakes as the others of doing things that will cost you marks. Right, let's go back and look at our possible essays. And now these are the possible essays. These essays, you'll see that in all your topics, your main topics, you have about 6 essays. Perhaps one can safely say an essay that was there last year is likely not to be an essay in this year's paper, November paper. That was there in November paper last year. But that content will definitely be assessed, because remember, in economics, we assess all the topics equally in the paper. So it will be asked either in the 8-mark question or in the data response question, the match column, or anywhere in the paper. But it is not likely to be a question that will be assessed as an essay this year, and then the following year it is the same question again. That is highly unlikely. Right, we talked about this structure. We have shown you that it is there in all your papers. Right. When you do your essay, remember I've just shown you that you have your 26 marks, which is not necessarily the most difficult one. I'll suggest to you guys that as you prepare, look at all the essays. Like, say for an example, like we talked about your strength, you think macroeconomics is for you. Even if you do the other essays for, say, pursuits, but I will humbly request that practice all the 26 marks. Let me go back. Let me just go there. These are the essays, say, for paper 1 microeconomics. We'll go back to them. Just do the 26 marks, all of them. And how do you practice that 26 marks of yours? Make sure that you know the title of the topic, that is essay title. And then, say, for an example, we take the objectives of the state as your title. Then try to write out those objectives. Say, for an example, you'll write economic growth, you'll write full employment, you'll write price stability, you'll write price stability, you write equity, and so on and so on. You write all your objectives. After we have done that, that is not enough. The challenge that we have with most of our candidates is that they can mention the subtopics of the main topic that they are assessed on, but they are not able to explain each one of them. If you are talking about the economic growth, an example, you need to, after you have taken that as your subtopic, have at least, that's the least you must have, 2. Have at least explanations, different explanations about the economic growth. And then if you can, have more. Because the more you have, if you forget, then you will be at 2 or at 3 and so on. You have told us economic growth is one of the main objectives, then you must explain. Say it's measured in real terms. For growth to take place, there must be production, and you go on and on and on. You make them, how do you write them? You write them in a point form. And then you talk about all the points that you need to talk about when you talk about the economic growth. And then, yes, let me not talk about all the unemployment and real terms and so on. What must happen for development to take place and so on. But that is what you do. You come to the next one, you take the subtopic, and then after talking about the subtopic, at least have 2 or more explanations, and you go on. That is how you practice your 26 marks. And if there's no subtopic, for an example, sometimes they can give you what is it that you must discuss. Say maybe they want you to do the methods, the advantages, and the disadvantages. Make sure that you have as much content as it is possible, so that when we mark you, at least you are 26, you are assured of your 26 marks before you go to their introduction, your conclusion, and your 10 marks. And this will help you a lot in order to remember the content that you must do, guys, for your 26 marks. Please try and use this if you haven't, so that you can see that it actually helps you remember the information. And you don't do it once. You do it, you realize, I'm not having all the, say, let's talk about what we have just talked about, the objectives of the state. I can't remember all of them. I'm remembering, say, only 2. You start again. You list them again until you realize at least I know 70% or 80% of these objectives. Then you do the explanation. As you do the explanation, remember, first you look at the book, you write them out. Then you close the book, you write them out again without looking at them. And as you write them, you'll find that you have not written enough. Then you go back, look, and then write until such time that you are satisfied that you have more than enough information that you remember about each of the main objective. That way, you are actually storing the information in your long-term memory. But if you look at it from the question paper, you look at the marking guideline, and you think you know it, the disaster will happen in the examination. It will really end in tears if you do that. This is not a newspaper. You need to practice and practice and practice. Right, now that we have discussed what is it that you must do to ensure that at least the essays, the 26-mark part of the essay, you must know. That you must know. Right, let us look at, right, we have talked about the introduction. We have talked about, let me talk about the additional part. The additional part also it is important to understand that most of the time, the additional part would be related to what was asked in the main part. Say, for an example, let's talk about the objectives of the state. The examiner is likely to ask you to evaluate the success of the implementation of those objectives. And when the examiner does that, what do? You go back and look at those objectives. The GDP, did we succeed? We said there must be growth. Did we have growth? Given the corona that we have, given the minus 51 that we have, you have heard over the news. Then you say, we have not succeeded because of 1, 2, 3. And don't be afraid to also relate to information that is not there in your textbook, but that is economics related. You go to the other one. Employment, we said the objective is full employment. The question here says, did we succeed or did we fail? But it was phrased as evaluate. So if you were to go to your negatives, we are very high on unemployment, given the fact that people have been retrenched and so on. So what do you do in your response? We have failed. These are the reasons. Even if you don't remember the actual statistics, like by how much did employment decrease, no, you just say we have unemployment increasing or employment has gone down. That is enough for us to understand what you are saying. So please don't refrain from answering the 10-mark questions. Either you'll be asked a graph, or you'll be asked to evaluate, or you will be asked to say, solve the problem. How can we solve the problem of whatever it is that you are asked? Right, remember, your opinion is also important. And you don't have to remember word for word from your economics textbook. That is what is nice about economics. But you refrain from writing because you think, I did not see it in my Enjoy Economics, or I did not see it in my Focus or any other book that we have, all the books that we have. Right, these are the possible essays that we have. Like I said, be also careful, check which essays are there in the old question papers that you use, because sometimes the question papers that you use have content as an essay, only to find that that is no longer an essay, where you'll find the question paper says the discussion of the relationship between the participants in the circular flow. Then you practice that, only to find that the focus as an essay in the circular flow is on the markets and not on the relationship of the participants. The relationship can be assessed somewhere, but not as an essay. So careful how you use your previous papers. It's important to go to examination guideline or use this. This is actually the extract of exactly what is there in your examination guideline. In microeconomics, the first one, you must discuss in detail the markets within the 4-sector model. I'll not go point by point. And then the second one, discuss in detail the new economic paradigm, and then explain the smoothing of the business cycle. Do you know that? Have you practiced that? Because they may ask you only to do the demand side policies, or they may ask you to do the demand side and the supply side, which is your paradigm. So you need to be sure of what is contained in your different essays. Discuss in detail the features underpinning forecasting. Now, when you do that, you say, remember our mind map, features and underpinning forecasting. Then you go, it is your indicators, is the length of your cycle, amplitude, the trend line, the extrapolation, the moving averages. After that, can you explain them? What is under indicators? Can you explain the leading indicator? Can you explain what do you mean by length of the cycle? And you repeat the process as I have guided you how to practice doing your essays. And then the fourth essay under the circular flow will be discuss in detail how each of the following factors contribute to poor public sector provisioning. Then you label them, because if they have not given you specific ones to explain, then you can now use what you remember. You have done this, you have practiced this. What is accountability, what is efficiency, what is assessing needs, and the explanations. And the guidance that I gave you, you must try by all means to have 2 or more points under each. It will be nice if you have 4 and more. But if you fail, don't give us 1 point, because you will not get your 26 marks. You will end up only getting 10 marks of the 26, and when this was just a middle order question that you had to recall the responses. The other essay that you need to do is discuss in detail the main objectives of the public sector. Practice this for your 26 marks. Discuss in detail export promotion and import substitution. Now here normally they like saying, right, give us the methods, give us the advantages, give us the disadvantages. But please try to have as many facts as it is possible. Then you have your economic pursuits. Yeah, why is this economic pursuits? Okay, let's try and drag it. Well, it's not cooperating. Let's leave it. But when we do the first essay that you have to do there, it has to do with the demand side and the supply side approach in the growth. So when you look at the demand side, that is when we look at the consumers, and when we look at the supply side, you look more on the business side, how growth can be achieved. It's not cooperating nicely, but more or less that is what that essay should be about. And then the second essay will be discussing in detail the supplies. Okay, let me just go back. I want to be sure of the first essay of the. Let me be sure. Let me not do this. Let me not do this. Let's do this and go back and say. Now that the extract is misbehaving, we go to the main document, and in our main document, yes, there it is. Discuss in detail the demand side approach in promoting the growth and development, like we said, and discuss in detail the supply side approach in promoting the growth, where we look here at the consumer side, here we look at the business side. Right. We go back. We look at the next one. The next one will be discuss in detail, and discuss in detail the South Africa's initiative endeavors in regional development. And then when you look at this one, here we just talk about the supply side approach and the demand side approach. Now, when you remember when we were doing the macroeconomics, there was somewhere we also looked at the paradigm. That was for the macroeconomics. Right. Now, the third essay that we have in economic pursuits will be discuss in detail the South Africa's initiatives in regional development. So now you have to know your SDIs, you have to know your IDZ, you have to know your SEZs. And don't confuse what is contained in the different content, because sometimes learners or the candidates tend to give the information that is supposed to be the IDZs in the SEZs and so on. Then they lose a lot of marks. And if you did your mind map, then you'll remember exactly. And even another nice thing, remember to give examples, because we have a lot of recent SEZs in South Africa. Right. The fourth essay here will be discussed in detail the regional development in South Africa in terms of the benchmark criteria. There you have them. Then you need to give them again as your subheadings and then explain them as I have given you guidance. And then discuss in detail the following indicators. Right. When you look at these, you have the economic indicators and you have the social indicators. And now you must do all the indicators, your economic indicators as well as your social indicators. So this will actually help you when you do your section A and section B as well. And the chances are also you will not be asked all the indicators, but because you don't know which of the economic indicators will an examiner ask you, which of the social indicators will the examiner ask you, you need to learn on all the indicators for your 26 marks. Now, when you look at this, actually it means therefore, not paper 2, it means actually therefore, if you are well prepared for your essays, the 26 marks part, then you can always, I'm not saying you must not respond to the 10 marks, but you can always make sure that of the 40 marks, at least the 26 or 28 is in the pocket. Then the other 10 mark, you will prepare it as depending on what the examiner has actually asked in that 10 mark. But you can actually answer that 10 marks because it is mainly an application and mainly what you would have experienced in your own environment or over the news and so on. Right. Thank you, guys. I think that will be the end in terms of what. Let's just go back and check if we have done everything here. Right. We have talked about the examination guideline, the knowledge of your content, the knowledge of the structure of the paper, and as you look at the structure of the paper, try to maximize your performance given how good you are in a particular section, like I've shown you through the different questions that are there, your choice questions in the paper. And then the responding to the questions is very important. The knowledge, the content that you have, sometimes if it is not put as a response to the question, then sometimes you lose a lot of marks. And make sure that you have a lot of content that you put in the question to relate to the marks that are allocated. If you are discussing for 8 marks, you can't give us 2 facts. And then practice with your previous papers. We have given you a lot of previous papers this year from other provinces to your teachers. As for those papers, but what is important is that you first answer the questions, then you look at the marking guideline as how you were expected to have responded. Don't look at the question and the answer, question and answer. You will not have gained much from those papers. And then those papers that you also have of other provinces of 2019 will also be most likely to be relevant in preparing yourself. The 2019 papers from DBE and maybe the 2018. And if you use any of those other old papers, make sure that you are aware of the changes that are there in the papers that are obviously not affected on those papers, as they are much, much older than when the new changes were brought to our attention. Now, another thing that I want to bring to your attention before I close this one is that when you look at your data response questions are now no longer, say, based on one topic only. If your data response question was focusing on, say, gross domestic product, you may find as you have the other questions, like maybe the middle order question, not necessarily based on the gross domestic product, but on other factors maybe that affect the gross domestic product, like, say, your repo rate and so on. So in a data response question, we were told that there will be more than one topic being assessed in the same data response question. So don't be surprised or don't be dismayed. What is important is, as long as you know your content, how the question is asked, where the question is asked, is actually immaterial, because you can just either recall or apply depending on the kind of question. I wish that you will use these tips as you prepare for your examination. Thank you so much.